America, and Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show. And of course, my good old boys from Canada, we thank you. And I'm telling everybody from across the pond and all around the world, when you follow Big C Sports and iHeartRadio Network, we want to bring you things that make sense to you, not only in the sports world, but also the world of politics as well, Big C. But as you mentioned, a lot of things going on in the world of the NBA right now with the playoffs. The NHL is kicking off with the playoffs. And also you have people still talking about baseball getting under swing, Big C. But what's impressed you so far in this week coming after the Easter holiday, Big C? Go right ahead, sir.
You know, Charlton, I think what has impressed me the most is the NHL playoffs.
Yeah.
When we sit back and look at 11 of the 24 games thus far in the NHL playoffs have gone in overtime.
Yeah.
You know, an unprecedented number of games. And so you talk about parity in a sport. That's what you're getting when you get to the playoffs in the NHL, where, you know, we are so used to seeing blowouts in other sports, but to have so many games, basically half of your games, go into overtime, the fans are getting full dollar worth for their money.
When we get into that second round of basketball, Big C. And something I want to bring up to you also is just, I mean, I'd be remiss if I did not bring up the idea that we have more and more things happening with POTUS, and I can't believe that we're talking about a thermonuclear war with North Korea. I know we're in a world where everybody loves sports, kind of to get away from what's going on in real life, Big C, but
I'm saying we, and I don't know why I said that. You know, that's what CTE does. When you voted for Trump, you know, to have him in office, you know, you voted for him for what he said, economic gain in America, that he was going to change around the economy. You know, we haven't seen any policy within his first 100 days that's going to change or affect the American economy. What he's talked about is cutting Medicare, you know, reducing the taxes for the top 1% of American wealth, you know, which is billions of dollars, that's going to Charlton, and also eliminating Obamacare. So when you do these things, Charlton, and you want to hurt the working class people, that's what he's doing. But also, Charlton, in American society, when you talk about war, you don't talk about the top 1% of Americans who are relatives going to fight in a war. You really look at impoverished people, Charlton, that you forced to go in and fight a rich man's war. Now, North Korea has been there for decades. You know, America was in war with them in the early 50s. They've been quiet for 70 years. So all of a sudden, Trump comes in, a guy who had 5 deferments from the is basically starting, you know, trouble with 2 different countries, Syria and North Korea. Americans need to sit back and look, okay, the last couple of wars that we've been in haven't been too economically balanced for the U.S.
No.
Because we've gotten nothing out of those wars that's going to benefit America. And now you bring a guy in, Charlton, who has no political experience, who has nothing but ego for knowledge, and is going to talk about challenging other people around the world. America needs to look. When Trump talks about challenging other countries around the world, those are your relatives that are going to go and lose their lives. Not his, your relatives. His multi-millionaire sons will never face. They will never even get close. They will never even go visit the
a very good point. And in fact, here in Northern California, the former president of Mexico, Vicente Fox, he was actually in the Bay Area, and he was doing a tour. He's not all that well. At least he doesn't walk like he's that well. And he's gotten up there in age. Maybe he had some hip issues, Big C. So he walks with a big limp. You're talking about one of the most powerful men in the world at that time. Here he is walking around limping. But something that he lamented was the fact that he wants life to be better for former Mexican. In California are going through the roof, Big C, because they simply don't go out in the field and do it. But as he lamented, they're not building a wall. And even Vicente Fox said, here is Donald Trump talking about building a wall and dropping a bomb on North Korea at the same time. That's not what America was all meant to do.
Well, Charlton, when you talk about produce prices going through the roof, you also have to understand that the farmers in California, where you're based at, have understood that if there's going to be a lack of workers, then you need to take out certain crops. And those field crops that had been staples in the economy of Central California will no longer be there. They're replacing them with nut crops, with almonds, pistachios, and grapes, things that you don't need the labor force. But by not needing the labor force for those things, Charlton, that means that produce is going to have to be imported into the United States or come from other places. And so if they're imported, that tariff that Trump has talked about putting in on import goods into America is going to affect the average citizen. And I've noticed the price in the grocery store, going in, looking at produce and other things along those lines, Charlton, that the price has risen expeditiously. And so the cost of food to put on the layman person's table in America now is going to be going up, Charlton, in summer anywhere from 10 to 15%. So when you think about the effectiveness of that on your pocket, when you sources, Charlton.
Well, Big C, that makes a lot of sense. And when you have a family of 5, you got to say this. Tell them that Charlton and Big C sent you. And, of course, Big C, yours is the one with the mud. But just again, back to Vicente Fox. And here's a gentleman that's been in the Bay Area more than Donald Trump has. And I know that California is more of a Democratic state. But you would think that produce would come to the largest state in the union with the biggest population, and he simply hasn't been out here. You have the former president of Mexico coming to California talking about how to create jobs for the Mexican Americans that want to come here and become legal citizens, Big C. And we all know that there's some here who may be undocumented from Russia. There are a lot of people that may be here undocumented from China. There are a lot of people who are here that may be undocumented from Europe, from European countries. No one's talking about building a wall. And to have the former president who said that we got along great with the United States prior to this garbage, I really think that says something about how bad America has become perception-wise throughout the country, where we actually think that dropping a bomb, a nuclear bomb, is going to hurt somebody outside of our own citizens. That's just idiotic thinking, Big C. Your thoughts?
Trying to pacify him right now for the most part, Charlton, when you look at it and not saying anything negative, because there's so much adverse publicity on this current president that we have. As far as his involvement with foreign countries, and the probe is still going on with Russia that may have affected the American presidential race, as well as his monies. And where are they coming from, Charlton? Where have they been tied to? These are things that he's trying to deflect from instead of answering. I think when you hold the highest office of the land in the United States, is that you need to you shouldn't be hiding things from the public that affected you and say that it's not important, especially when you want the American citizens to pay taxes. And and you're saying that you're not obligated, or you're not obligated to disclose. I think that huge disparity right there of dishonesty is what leads our country down the wrong path.
Yeah.
You know, it's almost like an athlete failing a drug test and say, well, you know, the president said it was okay, but the league does not allow it. So the president is saying that it's okay for me not to pay taxes. It's okay for me not to disclose your taxes. And I believe today was the final day to file your taxes for 2016 here in America. There's no one standing in line to get his taxes filed, Charlton. But you let millions of Americans not file their taxes, Charlton. All of a sudden there's a huge following them, if not a fine.
And that makes a lot of sense. And I'm glad you bring it up, Big C. You know, one of the things I love learning about when we talk about different things, we're not just talking about who won the game last night and who's going to win the championship. It's about things that affect people's lives. And what you just said today's the last day for people to file taxes. There are some IRS centers all around the country. They're expecting 200 filings in one day, when normally they may get about 30 filings. Okay, about 200 in one day, they're saying they're going to be burning the midnight oil. And in fact, you got to get it in before 12 o'clock p.m. in order to not have to pay that penalty. But POTUS, he should be the one setting the example, Big C. But we know that's not the case. And I just want to diverge a little bit into some Major League Baseball games coming up tonight on a beautiful Tuesday all over the country. It feels like Mother Nature can't decide if she wants rain or if
Charlton,
she wants Yeah.
You know, for the past 8 years in Washington, you know, America's been blessed with a wonderful first family.
Yeah.
And that, you know, I watched the Easter egg roll, the annual 134th Easter egg roll at the White House,
Yeah.
you know, over the weekend. And I saw a president and his family who refused to interact with the public or the children that participated at the White House. And that's the first time I've seen that, Charlton.
Yeah, I noticed that.
You know, during the Bush administration, the Clinton administration, and the previous Bush administration, and especially the Carter administration.
Yeah.
And the Obamas for 8 years participated with the children.
Yeah.
They dressed like the children. They didn't outdress the children. They didn't say that, you know, we're better than you. They got down on the grass with the children, picked up eggs. I didn't see that from the Trumps.
No.
And so what I saw, Charlton, were people who felt elected them.
Yeah.
That they do not go down to that level of the general public. You guys are beneath us. And so I saw that as disrespectful to the American public, the lack of participation from the first family in the annual Easter egg roll at the White House. People may think that I'm being nitpicky, but so many things are important to Americans to show us that you are a part of us, that you represent us, that you will do what we do. The Trump family does not represent that.
With POTUS as if he was up on a podium looking out over the White House yard. And I noticed also in the greatest country, I think, in the country or in the world, and one of the most diverse countries on the planet, there was hardly any kids of color. And I know it may not matter if you good old boys don't want to have, you know, interaction and integration, but to me, just from what I saw, and I only saw it on CNN and another news channel, it was so segregated. It was like the White House celebrated maybe back in the 1940s when integration was not the norm, Big C. But, you know, that's what POTUS wants, and obviously he has diverted the media's attention away from his indictment with the collusion with Russia and their, I guess, what you call playing in our elections, Big C. We know that's going to come up, but he's trying to push it off as much as possible. If we do have a war, then it obviously takes a backseat, unfortunately. I do want to say, in a little bit of the baseball world coming up, you know, we talk about how many great teams are playing in baseball. I believe the Cubs that won the Big C World Series last year, for the first time, Big C, they're playing under 500 baseball. And obviously we want them, a lot of people pick them to finish as the Central Division champions, Big C, at least. And what's the struggles with them right now? Just a lack of continuity? Or is it the fact that they're not as focused as they have been over the last several years, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, I think they're suffering a little bit of hangover. You know, you go 108 years without winning a championship. You don't. Not only that, Charlton, the media has pushed happening, but Cubs right now, their bullpen is what's struggling the most for that team, Charlton. The starters are what you expect from the starters. You know, they're below 3 with the ERA.
Yeah.
But the bullpen has just not been able to hold anybody. They're +5 in their ERA.
Yeah.
So, you know, until they get their bullpen on track, Charlton, the Cubs are going to struggle a bit. But, you know, this is a team that's built for August and September,
Yeah.
and even into October. So, you know, the first month of the season is always, you know, a whirlwind where you're trying to establish yourself. And I don't care whether it's football, basketball, or baseball, or hockey. You know, when it gets down to prime time, when you're starting to settle the wheat from the chaff, and that's the latter part of the season, the last 2 months,
Yeah.
the Cubs will be right there, Charlton. They'll get their bullpen rolled straightened out, and this was a team that will be...
Boston's going to be at Toronto. Detroit is at Tampa. Cleveland, they're at Minnesota. The LA Angels are at Houston. And you have Texas at Oakland. In the National League, you have Philadelphia at the New York Mets. Washington at Atlanta in that new, beautiful ballpark down in Georgia. Should be a great game there. We have Milwaukee at Chicago. And then Pittsburgh at St. Louis. That's a big rivalry there. San Francisco, they're going to be at KC. Two teams that faced off in the World Series just a couple of seasons ago. And you have Arizona. They are playing, looks like San Diego. And then you have Colorado. They're playing the LA Dodgers down at Chavez. We're being Big C, as we talk a little bit about baseball, in the American League, think about some of the greatest hitters in the world of baseball. I know we think about, in the American League, Jose Canseco, them good old boys back in the day, and Mark McGwire when they had the Bash brothers out here in Oakland. But right now, the American League batting, you have Garcia of Chicago, and he's batting at 465, and Headley out of New York is batting 397, and you have Lindor out of Cleveland batting 362. Those numbers will surely come down, or are we seeing an era of bad pitching, Big C, your thoughts?
You have to look no further than Cabrera in Detroit.
Oh, yeah.
You know, this man, you know, is a 320 lifetime hitter.
Yeah.
You know, he's the last man to win the Triple Crown in Detroit.
Yeah.
So, you know, his numbers are consistent all the time. And matter of fact, in his last 5 games, he's hit 3 home runs. So, you know, and in his first 8 games, he only hit 1. So, you know, those numbers will be brought back down to earth. But when I think about great hitters, I think about Cabrera. You know, this is a guy, you know, we talked about the Cubs winning the World Series. The last time the Cubs was in this position to get to the World Series, they were defeated by the Marlins years ago when you had the Barkman, you know, interference and everybody City.
Yeah.
You know, he's not on one of the coasts like you would get a Mike Trout or you know, Bryce Harper.
Yeah.
You know, those young guys who are on the East and West Coast. But, you know, when you look at Cabrera in Detroit, he's a professional man of leisure when it comes to the bat. You know, he's going to punish anybody who's throwing the ball at him.
I tell you what, Big C, and that's a very good point. Speaking of intercollegiate play also, Baltimore's at Cincinnati tonight, and Miami is at Seattle. One thing I want to ask you, you're a historian when it comes to sports. You just mentioned the guys like Bryce Harper. I go back to the days of Barry Bonds and, you know, the great Hank Aaron, who threw out the first pitch at the beautiful ballpark down there in Georgia. And I think he threw it out to the skipper that had been at the helm for like 20 years, Bobby Cox. Can you imagine Hank Aaron throwing out the first pitch to Bobby Cox to christen the new stadium down there in Georgia, Big C? That's history right there. I know the great Rod Carew, who's one of the greatest players out there also, recently has dealt with a few health issues. But just imagine how great these players were. One thing I do notice as we all get up in age, Big C, they limp around a lot, Big C. Is there something?
Braves, when that move came to Atlanta, he stayed with that organization, Charlton, for a lifetime.
Yeah.
And you think about the privilege, and it's something that young players don't look at nowadays, Charlton, finishing their career with the team that originally brought them in. But Hank Aaron is a tremendous ambassador for the city of Atlanta, as well as the state of Major League Baseball.
Yeah.
You know, such an iconic figure who played the game properly. About the death threats that he played under in the pursuit of a Babe Ruth.
Yeah.
The disrespect of the white fan out there in professional sports who wanted to take a black athlete's life because he was chasing his hollow record. I think if anybody checked the DNA on Babe Ruth, they will see that he has a lot of African American in his blood. The cynicism and the narrow-mindedness that we live in society, just like we have in the White House, is that we have people that think along those lines. But today's modern Atlanta can accept a Hank Aaron and many other African-American athletes. When you look at how they performed here and being fabrics in this culture here, Charlton, over the decades. But Hank Aaron is a true American treasure. When you look back at the annals of sports, Charlton, and you look around and you think about the ambassadors of baseball, you have Willie Mays out there in your neighborhood in San Francisco. You have Hank Aaron, you know, here down in the South. You know, we talk about the lack of African-American participation in Major League sports, and the reason for that is because Major League Baseball does not invest the money in inner-city youth, African-American youth, that they should, because they can go to Latin America and they can get a young Latin American player, put him through their boot camps that they have, keep a kid for 5 years and invest less than $100,000 in him, Charlton. They own him for 5 years. They get him at 12 to 15 years of age. And if he pans out, they still have something cheap. If he doesn't pan out, Charlton, in baseball, Lord, that's... So when you look at them not willing to invest in the minority player in America, because they would have to pay that player top dollar when he got into the major leagues. And that's not something that society wants to do. You will pay a white player, Charlton City, because he looks like the fan who's coming in buying a ticket. But society has changed over the years, Charlton. Society wants performance. When we look at the NBA, we look at the NFL, Charlton. The fan wants the best athlete on the floor. Played in society. It's black music that's played. White kids are buying it. There's not enough black people buying the music out there to support the music industry. They're not downloading it. They might bootleg one or two songs, but they're not downloading. Look at how professional society is treating African American, Charlton, in the sports arena. It's just like with Colin Kaepernick. When you got a redneck president saying, don't sign this black quarterback, that's all it is. You're a redneck president at that point.
No, that's
not even good for you. Just straight up redneck. So you want to take things back to the old days before they were political correctness, that you can say and do what you want to people. That's basically what he has said. And I think that's wrong for the American public to support something like that. Because what if he gets mad with you and you're white and he says, well, don't hire those white people. He's going out being racist and that, you know, Republican, Democrat.
That's true.
Let the people vote for what they believe in. Don't come out there with your tweets blasting people. American public, I think, is getting more and more intelligent about this man. And just like they are intelligent about sports, Charlton, when we watch a sporting event, we don't need 3 minutes.
Sports is $1 billion. Not only are we in all 50 states, but we can cover most people throughout the world on different continents. Tweet out the Big C Sports on the iHeartRadio network every Monday through Friday at 5 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time, worldwide on the iHeartRadio network. Big C, something I want to bring up that, we just finished talking about how great baseball is, and I think you missed the standing ovation, the applause, when I said you should give that so Hank Aaron some of that good old boy moonshine down south, he and Bobby Cox. I think Bobby Cox grew up in Selma, California, just south of Fresno in the Central Valley, so he knows what it's like to see migrant workers out on the farms and trying to get fruits and vegetables to the dinner table, Big C. But something that just kind of reared its ugly head, Jose Canseco, as one of the most honest baseball players, even though people didn't appreciate free, right? Well, this good old boy from the Seattle Mariners, I think he was suspended 50 games for taking needles and putting them someplace where he's not supposed to put them. Big C, your thoughts on that, Big C? Yeah.
And so if you get suspended, you still are not banned from the league. You're still going to have an opportunity to play. So players are taking that chance, unfortunately. And the league, Charlton, at any point, and it doesn't make a difference whether it's baseball, football, basketball, hockey.
Yeah.
They have safeguards in place if they wanted to stop the use of performance enhancement drugs.
Yeah.
But I think all leagues embrace it because they want to see enhanced performance.
Yeah, they do.
They want to see ultimate excitement for the fans. You look at the NBA. No one talks about in the NBA when a guy's point production in a game increases, Charlton, in a season.
Yeah.
They don't say he takes drugs. So why in football when a guy all of a sudden, it gains another 30 yards? Right now.
Yeah.
Are they drug testing them?
Well,
or are they waiting on them to come back to earth? It all depends on the complexion of a player, Charlton.
Yeah, that's
whether you're going to drug
point.
test them or not. If you got a white guy hitting 400.
That hits them. They love seeing the home run. They're talking about a $500 million contract over 10 years, which is just ridiculous. The guy's never even been to the NLCS, Big C. But I just want to close out as we have the final segment of our program coming up, Big C. So much in the world of sports. Now, I know you good old boys down south. You love your football. You were just out in California down there to see the Clippers close out the regular season, to see that good old boy Paul Pierce have his final regular season game. And you saw the Clippers play. Now you're probably back down south on your boat someplace, Big C. How would you compare the attitude of California sports versus the attitude of sports, say, down in the South, whether it's football or basketball, Big C? Your thoughts on that? Yeah.
We're here for the event, not the game.
Yeah.
That's the backdrop that I viewed. But, when I go to an event, here in the South, and it's tenacious. There's nothing like it. The only thing that could rival it, Charlton, would be the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
As far as intensity. But the thing about Tiger Stadium versus the Super Bowl, there's 102,000 people inside the stadium. Even in college basketball, and we're on baseball right now.
Yeah.
College baseball in the South, Charlton, especially in the SEC, is unrivaled across the country. When you look at the College World participants from the SEC, Charlton, that participate in that tournament. But you go to these stadiums on college campus, Charlton, and you're seeing anywhere from 15 to 30,000 fans in these college baseball arenas. So when we talk about fan involvement, as far as it being a culture and a lifestyle,
I think it was the Beach Boys that saying they wish they all could be California girls. Now I know you good old girls down south. I don't want to get you in any kind of trouble at all, Big C. But should and I don't want to even sound like POTUS. But who has the most fashionable? Let me say it that way. Who has the most fashionable women, Big C? The East Coast.
Well, Charlton, I look at it. We got a whole lot of old natural down. This week as we close out the show. We got the NHL, we have the NBA, we have baseball, even college football. They're selling out their spring games in the Big Ten and the Pac, I guess the Big 8 and all that's good. Not the Big 8, but the SEC and the Big 14. What is it now, the Big 10 or the Big 14 with Ohio State and them good old boys? But your thoughts on what you're looking forward to going into this week? These are three teams that everybody expected to be up 1-0, Charlton, and yet they're down 0-1. And so, it's going to be very difficult because when we get to this time of the season, Charlton, it's just about having the hot hand. That's what it comes down to right now. You can't let a game be close in the playoffs and say, I need the last second shot. Now, come out and you think about LeBron James-led teams, Charlton. Since he's been in the NBA, that 18 times they've been up 2-0 in a series. 18 times they've won those series under LeBron James. So if LeBron goes up, and I can't say the Cavaliers, but if LeBron goes up 2-0 on Indiana, they might as well start talking about a Paul George trade right now.